So excited to have a few extra bodies here today. Getting more and more like a church. I love it. And we're excited, and we've got more news coming with that after the service. We'll tell you what the details of that very, very soon. But this should just whet our appetites. And I was telling the worship team that this morning, that I'm so excited for church to get back to normal. But even more than that, we should be excited for the coming of the Lord, calling His children home. What a day that will be. So that's what we're going to open up our worship service with this morning. Sing with us at home. Sing with us here. It's going to be so great to have a few extra voices today.
we await a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ.
All right, church, this is a new song. I want you to take a big, deep breath. And we're going to sing these great truths about who God has called us to be, what He's done for us. And the best thing that we can say to all of God's promises is amen.
Amen.
1, 2, 3, 4. You have given us a new name as sons and daughters of your righteousness. You have taken all of our shame and given us the gift of holy grace. Your hair crying out for faith to believe the words you say. You say we are one. You say we belong to you. Your grace is enough. Nothing more than we can do. You say we belong by your blood. All that we can say is amen. You have given us a new hope, an anchor for the soul that shall not fail. Jesus, we believe your truth shines. Yes, in the darkest night you shall prevail. Your hair crying out for faith to believe the words you say. You say we are one. You say we belong to you. Your grace is enough. Nothing more than we can do. You say we belong by your blood, by your blood. And all that we can say is amen. Amen. Your word is true. Amen. We trust in you. Amen. Your word is true. Amen. We trust in you. You say we are one. You say we belong to you. Your grace is enough. Nothing more than we can do. You say we belong by your blood, and all that we can say, and all that we can say, and all that we can say is amen. All I have is Christ. Hallelujah. Jesus is my Lord.
Amen. Amen.
That's our cry this morning, Father. That we are singing hallelujah. There's nothing that we can boast of. Not a thing. We can boast in you. That we are sons and daughters of the High King. That we are co-heirs with you, with Christ. We boast in that and we say hallelujah. All we have is you. God, we pray now that your Spirit would just continue to move in our service. That you would bless Brother Timmy as he opens your book. And that you speak to us. And we will listen with open ears and open hearts. That you can change us to be more and more like Jesus. God, we love you this morning. Hallelujah. Amen.
Amen. Well, it's good to have some of our families here with us this morning. With the leadership, we are testing out on what next Sunday looks like. Hello, virtual church. And so we got some church here. Man, it's really nice to have some folks here this morning. And we're testing out how things are going to go. Just to let you know, we are going to be having church next week. So if you feel comfortable coming to church and being a part of us physically, so we're going to be here just having normal church worship starting at 11. So we'd love for you to come. We're going to be practicing social distancing. We're going to be spacing people apart. We're going to ask you to go in through a certain door. You'll see signs and stuff next week, but realize we'll be taking some extra precautions as we ease into this. And we want you to feel comfortable, but we also don't want to hinder your worship. So we want you to be here if you can. If you can't, don't feel guilty. If you feel like it's not time for you or your family, that is perfectly fine. You can watch us on Facebook and still be a part of what we're doing on Sunday morning. But we will be beginning to put our toes in the water next week. We're kind of testing things out. So don't forget, if you got questions about it, let us know. Let the leadership know. We will give you some announcements on Facebook as to where to come in, what to expect, and that sort of thing. So we're excited about it, getting back together. All right. I can say amen now, and everyone can repeat me. So amen. Amen. All right. That's good. That's good. All right. So we're going to be in the book of 1 Peter, chapter 3. The book of 1 Peter, chapter 3, looking at verses 1 through 7. I have to say I'm super thankful to have my family here this morning. I hadn't got to see them while I preached in a long time, so it's good to have them here. We're going to be looking at verses 1 through 7 of chapter 3, and we're talking about the biblical marriage. The biblical marriage. Peter had been encouraging us to be subject, for the Lord's sake, to all authorities, to all human institutions, to the emperor, to the governors. So we're supposed to keep the speed limits, Brian Silver. We're supposed to pay taxes. We're supposed to be respectful towards the policemen and the senators and honor whom the Lord has put over them, over us rather, by submitting to their leadership. Now, there comes a time where that could there's a line that they could cross, and we would be sinning against God if we're told to do something that's not in the Bible. But for the most part, God has instituted the governors, the leaders above us to bless us and to punish us when we need it. And so we talked about what submission was. We talked about submission, that it's a wider Christian virtue that we should all pursue. It's something that we should look to, that we should submit. It's fitting for us to submit. Jesus Christ submitted on the cross to the Father's will. And so we are going to look today at the relationship of a husband and his wife, and what submission looks like there, what leadership looks like for the husband, and see how this whole idea of marriage fits into the grace of God. Now, it's interesting that Peter talks about such lofty things like the grace of God and salvation and submission and suffering, and then he throws in some marriage talk, right? So obviously this is something that's very important. the idea of the marriage and the way the marriage plays out is instrumental in how we as Christians behave in society. And so as we behave in this world, we need to understand that it begins in the home. And so we need to have a really good handle on what the biblical marriage looks like. The thing that comes across here as you read it, and we're going to get into it in just a second, is there's a word there, a couple of words that people don't like. The first sentence says that women are supposed to be subject to their husbands, supposed to submit. Then they're called the weaker of the two. Man, people bristle up like that. They just, it's just not good. And so people don't like that. We want to break that down and see what that means this morning. So read with me 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. When they see respectful and pure conduct, do not let your adorning be external, but the braiding of hair, the putting on of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear. But let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And you are her children, if you do good and do not fear anything that is frightening. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to them as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of this grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. May the Lord bless the reading of this text. So it's interesting that in this time period, women, children, slaves were all considered property. They were not considered as valuable as a man. Most religions, other than Christianity, treated women as a lesser creature in comparison to men, and children lesser than women until the boy child was raised into a man. And so the New Testament church was literally the founders of what we would call women's rights. It was the New Testament church that loved women, that loved children, that loved slaves. It was because the church valued these people and considered them the image of God, it was one of the reasons the church grew. It was very popular for women to be attracted to the Christian belief and towards Jesus Christ, because Jesus loved all people and considered the woman as just as equal as the man, and made in the image of God like the man. And so it's interesting here that Peter is writing some language and some words that you would not find in another religious writing. And in fact, this was extremely countercultural. This was faux pas to the first century Asia Minor. Notice people would read this and they could not believe that Peter would value a woman or even address a woman in this letter. In fact, most religions did not even address children, women, or slaves, because they felt that the man was the only one who needed to know the religious duties of that certain religion. It's Christianity that addressed those who society considered less than. And so we find Peter here dealing with two essentials to the biblical marriage. We have 2 points. Believe that? A Timmy 2-point sermon. They're long 2 points, just so you know. But the first point here is biblical womanhood. Biblical womanhood. If you look here, Peter says, likewise, ladies, women, be subject to your own husbands. And you've got a situation here where the woman is married to a man who doesn't know Christ. And Peter is getting very practical and very pastoral on how she should behave and act within this marriage. He doesn't tell her to leave. He in fact tells her to act in a certain way that she may have an evangelistic edge upon him and that he may come to Christ. But a biblical womanhood is made up of some factors. A biblical woman is someone, first of all, who hopes in God. If you go down to verse 5 in chapter 3, it says, "For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves." So really, Peter is describing biblical womanhood as women who hope in God. The joy and strength of a woman comes from her hope in God. The deepest root of Christian womanhood is mentioned here, And it's hoping in God, putting your full hope and trust in God. A Christian woman doesn't put her hope in her husband or in getting a husband. She does not put her hope in her looks or in what she adorns. She puts her hope in the promises of God. It's best described in Proverbs 31:25, where it says, strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the times to come. Basically, Proverbs says that she laughs at everything in the future. She doesn't worry about the future because her hope is in God. Her hope is in the promises of God. She looks away from the troubles and miseries of life. She looks away at the situation she may be in that seems bleak, and she focuses her attention on the sovereign power and the love of God. The love of God, the sovereign God, who rules heaven, who does on earth whatever He pleases. The woman who hopes in God knows her Bible. She knows her theology. She knows the promises that He will be with her, that He will help her, that He will strengthen her, no matter what. This is a woman who is deep, unshakable, rooted her life into the hope of God. And Peter makes it explicit that he's not talking about any woman who's just barely kind of dabbling in Christianity, who just goes to church when they can or posts some good Christian messages on Facebook. He's talking about someone who has unshakable hope like Sarah. Now, if you know anything about Sarah in the Bible, she went through some hard stuff. She went through some things that were kind of crazy. She had a baby in her 90s. That's insane. We had a baby in our late 30s. That was insane. Sorry, not late 40s. Abraham did some really stupid stuff. If you read the Bible, Abraham did some things like saying that Sarah, when he was afraid that somebody might kill him so that they could take Sarah as his wife. Evidently, Sarah was really good looking because everybody wanted Sarah. Even in her elderly age, they wanted Sarah as a wife. And they said, hey, if we kill Abraham, we'll get him. Abraham said, hey, I'm not even married to her. I'm her brother. Wow. Come on, dude. Man, he botched it a couple times. They wondered, they struggled. They went through some tough times. Life was not this prosperity gospel that we have been so conditioned to think in our lives and in our minds, but life was tough for her. And so Peter says, like Sarah, you hope in God like Sarah did. And the ladies who also hoped in God. Have unshakable hope in the God and the goodness of our sovereign Lord. A biblical woman hopes in God. Your flesh will fail you. Your husband will fail you. And all the ladies say, amen. This world will fail you. Your desires, your wants will fail you, but it's only God who stays true. And there's not some kind of special formula to hope in God. It's just simply believing Him, simply finding your joy in Him, simply reading of Him. Hope in God. Holy women, biblical women hope in God. But biblical women also triumph over fear. They triumph over fear. It says here that they hope that a biblical woman hopes in God. They talk about their their external look and the things going on in their mind. And so when we hope in God, we're like Sarah. When the women are like Sarah, when they're like that virtuous woman found in Proverbs 31. Not a virtual woman, a virtuous woman. Sorry, we live in this new world. That's a word I say a lot. The virtuous woman. It says it how she laughs at tomorrow. You see, biblical women have victory over fear. You know why? Because they put their hope in God. You see, when you put your hope in God, when you triumph over fear, you're not putting your hope in your husband or things around you, because you know what? From the very beginning, men, we've been really botching it, haven't we? It's the Garden of Eden. We let the snake in the garden. Adam let the snake in, man. And women constantly fight this tendency of fearing their world and their circumstances. Even when they have a good husband, even when you have a good marriage, Your tendency is to have fear and to have distrust because of what the curse that we carry because of sinfulness. You see, sin's curse has affected all of the daughters of Eve and all of the sons of Adam. In that, there's this constant fear that kind of just is there. It's lurking in the shadows. And if you're not careful, it'll take over your joy. It'll take away your hope. But how do you kill it? How do you get the fear? How do you triumph over the fear? So it's marked by hope. And then what grows out of hope is fearlessness. The biblical woman doesn't fear the future. Proverbs says she even laughs at it. This is the presence of hope and the presence of hope and sovereignty of God in her life and being secure in that. It drives out fear. You defeat fear with trusting in the promises of God and recalling the promises of God and looking back where God has not left you and looking back and thinking, wow, God has got us through this time. God got our family through this. It was God. And so you're hoping in these promises. Satan wants to put you into fear, and he wants to paralyze you with your fear. He wants to starve you for your freedom. He wants you to be scared of tomorrow. He wants to rob you of your sleep. But a mature Christian woman knows that in the midst of suffering, they believe that they one day will be restored by Christ. And they laugh at tomorrow and trust God. It says God does whatever He pleases. So they have no fear of things that's going on, or they're not going to be troubled. They entrust their souls to the faithful Creator. That's what a biblical woman does. They entrust their souls to God. They hope in God. They triumph over their fears. They triumph over the fears. They have victory. They have hope, but they also focus on the internal. Verse 4 talks about how Peter's telling them, and he says, let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of the gentle and quiet spirit. Evidently, Peter knew that a woman could use her looks and her ways to get her husband to do things. And in this situation, Peter's saying, hey, you'll win your Christ, or you'll win your husband to Christ, not with how you're looking and how you're braiding your hair and your external. It's going to be the internal. It's going to be that internal hope. It's going to be that quietness. It's going to be that gentleness of spirit. It's going to be that trusting in the promises of God that's inside. You see, when a woman puts her hope in God and not in her husband and not in her looks, she overcomes fear then by the promise of God, and it has an effect on her heart. It has an effect on her inner spirit, on her tranquility. This is what Peter says, the imperishable beauty of the gentle spirit. This is very precious in the sight of God. This is a confidence inside that God has got you. That you're trusting Him, not your looks, not what you can do and woo these people to you, but what's going on inside of you. This is the opposite of what the world says today. When the world is consumed with fitness, it's consumed with your looks. I mean, for crying out loud, we have CrossFit competitions. There's diets and fads and all these different things going on where you need to look your best and have you this and have you that and look this way. It's everywhere. And so it's totally against the way the world looks at it. The Bible says that women should love God and seek that pureness in their souls and in their hearts. You see, when you try to get attention by the outer world, and you try to get attention by the way you look, what begins to happen is that you begin to trust the outside and the flesh and what you can do. But I've got news for you. That stuff goes away. That stuff will fail. Seduction, looks is not the way to gain favor from a man or in the world. And if we're not careful, the message we're sending our young ladies is that looks is everything, and this is how you gain good standing and favor. The Bible's very clear. And Peter's very clear, even in the midst of a non-biblical marriage, the way you are to operate, a Christian lady, is by having a gentle trust, a confidence in your soul towards Yahweh. not on your skills, not on your looks, not on your husband, but in God. So a biblical woman, she hopes in God. She triumphs over fear. She focuses on the internal. And she practices beautiful submission. We're kind of going backwards here. Beautiful submission. We live in a time where genders are fluid, don't we? Where it's like, hey, I can be what I want to be. There's this culture war going on. Even just a few months ago, before the COVID virus hit, there was a tennis player who said and told the Olympic Committee that it wasn't fair for transgender women. I don't know if that's the right term, but anyway, basically, it wasn't fair for men who wanted to be girls to play tennis against other girls. It just wasn't fair. And the Olympic Committee said, well, you're right. We need to make some rules. And then this lady who said this caught flack from everybody, saying she was a bigot, saying she didn't include it. And there, basically the world wants to tell you that there is no difference between the genders. That genders are fluid, and so you just be whatever you want to be. Whatever you want to be. One day Shep wanted to be a dog, but we didn't put him in the dog lot and put a flea collar on him, did we? I mean that's silly, right? But still, we do live in this world, so we could laugh and joke about it, but we must take it serious. But the fact of the matter is that across the board, for the most part, now there are exceptions. There's probably a gal out there who can beat me arm wrestling, but it's very far and very few. There's exceptions, but for the most part, men and women are different. They're different. We've been to the Highland Games several times up in Grandfather Mountain, and at the Highland Games, the men compete in heavyweight athletics, and so the women have some other heavyweight athletics, and the woman's hammer is 8 pounds. The man's hammer is 16 pounds. The woman's caber is 12 feet. The man's caber is 20 feet. The men compete in hand-to-hand combat wrestling up there. The women compete in Highland dancing. There's differences. I've got a son and daughters. I promise you, they are different. God made them that way. You're different. And a woman, submission to a woman is not a sign of weakness. It's part of the difference in the way that God made us. Peter goes on and says a woman is a weaker vessel. And I've talked about this before here, but it's almost like comparing a vessel is something that holds fluid or something, usually food. A vessel is like something that holds some kind of a drink. When Peter says a weaker vessel, it's almost like saying a man is a Stanley thermos, a woman is a crystal goblet. They both hold liquid, but man, there's a big difference there, right? Or Carhartts are like men, ladies are like silk, right? You see the difference there. So basically, submission to a woman is beautiful in that it allows the headship of man. It means it's a means of grace, and that man takes responsibilities that the woman should never have. The man does things and is created to do things that a woman should never have to do. A man is a defender. We defend and protect and go on the offensive if need be. We can take a punch. We can do things differently. We can handle things physically different. We think differently. We think as fixers. We think as conquerors. My son Shepherd, every day, he thinks of things to conquer. Whether it's a hill or a swimming pool and filling it full of rocks or whatever. He's got goals and agendas for the day, like a little warrior child. And he's got these things. Other girls are interested in how can we nurture the house? How can we beautify this? How can I make some art? How can I... Different things are different. And so the man... When a woman submits, she is allowing headship. And submission is a function. It's not an innuendo stating the incapacities intellectually of a woman. It doesn't say that she's stupid or she's less than. The fact is, men and women are not the same. We need to face the fact that women continue today to be preyed upon and oppressed. We need to understand that when Peter says they may be weaker, and the fact is that there is a difference. And so when we take away the roles of man and woman, we are placing women in a place of danger, in a place where they don't need to be. They're vulnerable. And our society is so bought into this fact that we are equal. The women are more vulnerable than they have ever been. Being hurt, being abused, being neglected, because the men will rise up, and then the world is saying, yes, ladies, you can do this role. But it's not that you are incapable of thinking. It's not that you're less than. It's just the fact that we are made different and have different roles. Equal, yet different. We struggle with Peter's vocabulary when he says that women are to submit and that they are weaker. But women, since the beginning of time, of the two genders have been the most taken advantage of. Women have always been the most looked upon as objects of desire. Women have always been more abused than men, always been more neglected than men. Women, from the beginning of time up until the last 200 years, were treated as property in the world. They were considered mindless, forgotten, traded, and generally not cared for. And so Peter's term of submission is not a term of oppression. It's a term meant to protect, provide, and pastor our women. Our young girls need to know this. We struggle with Peter's vocabulary because it's a testimony of our inner being, that we know the vulnerabilities of women and are uncomfortable with anything that might seem to lend weight to that definition of a woman. We all know that women are the most vulnerable and thus weaker. You understand?
Amen.
Like I can take a crystal goblet and I can put it on a nice table and I can shine it and it's going to look good and I'm going to show it off and it's going to make the dinner really nice. I'm not going to bring out the Stanley thermos for that, okay? I'm not going to crack open the Stanley and pour you a hot cup of black bitter coffee. But if I'm in the woods, or if I'm working out in a pump station with some water situation, I'm having to weld, and it's cold and it's blowing snow, I'm not going to take the crystal goblet with me.
Amen.
I'm not going to take the crystal goblet and try to sip it. No, I'm going to take the Stanley, man, and I'm going to crack that thing open. That coffee's going to be hot. I'm going to pour it, and I'm going to drink it. And I might use that Stanley to chop the wheels of the welder when I'm done. But I can't do that with the crystal goblet. I can walk through chasing rabbits in my Carhartts all day. But I put on a nice silk suit or a cool silk shirt, it's not going to work out. But hey, if I'm roller skating, silk shirt's the way to go. See the difference? And so, shame on us as using women as objects and then telling them, deceiving them, saying, yeah, you're the same. They've never been treated the same. You know why? Because you can go downtown Asheville right now. There'll be some men who are abused and neglected. But I promise you, 9 to 1 women are more abused and neglected.
Amen.
Promise you.
Amen.
What does submission not mean? Let's talk about that. Because, I'll just be honest with you, there's some men who have used that term. And they'd be like, honey, you submit to me. You ask me if you can go to that next room. I know guys are that way. And I'll go ahead and say, if you're that way, man, you're not a man. You probably need to be punched in the face with the Bible. Submission does not mean agreeing with everything your husband says. You can see that in verse 1. She's a Christian, he's not. He has one set of ideas about reality. She has another. And so Peter says, be submissive. Be submissive and quietly love him. So submission does not necessarily mean agreeing with everything your husband says. Submission does not mean leaving your brain at the wedding altar. It doesn't mean you don't have the ability to think for yourself. Because here you have a woman who's heard the gospel. And she has decided for herself to follow Jesus. She has been given the truth of Christ, and she has chosen to follow him. Her husband evidently probably heard it too, and he's thought otherwise. He has disobeyed the word, Peter says. So he's heard it, and either he's thought about it or not even looked at it. But here we have a woman who's thinking for herself. Submission does not mean avoiding every effort to change a husband. And so the point of this text is so that the woman may win her husband to Christ. And so she's being submissive and gentle in order to change him. So, yes, it doesn't mean that you can't change your husband. Submission does not mean putting the will of the husband before the will of Christ. So, this text clearly teaches that the wife is a follower of Jesus before and above being a follower of her husband. Submission to Jesus makes submission to their husband a glorious thing, but it starts with Jesus first. Submission does not mean that a wife gets her personal and spiritual strength from her husband. A good husband should indeed strengthen and bless their wife. That husband should make a place that's nourishing, that's wonderful for her to thrive in. But this woman obviously would not find that from her husband. She would get that from Christ. Finally, submission does not mean that a wife is to act out of fear. Verse 6 talks about Sarah, if you do good and not fear anything that is frightening. So in other words, submission is free. Submission is free. It's not forced by fear. It's not influenced by withholding love or attention from the lady. It is something that's freely given through grace. And I promise you, ladies, there is purpose and joy and freedom in submission. You see, when she submits to her husband, whether he's a believer or an unbeliever, she does it in freedom, not fear. So what is submission? Submission is this. It's the divine calling of a wife to honor and affirm her husband's leadership and to help carry it through according to her gifts. So sometimes the submitting to the husband is pushing the man into leadership. Sometimes you lead or you follow your husband at arm's distance behind him and you're following him. Sometimes you've got your shoulder in the small of his back pushing him, right? Sometimes you're doing that. And so it's the disposition to follow a husband's authority and an inclination to yield to his leadership. It's an attitude that says, I delight for you to take the initiative of the family. We put it in layman's terms. It's when daddies and husbands lead spiritually. They're the ones that make sure the kids and the wife gets to church. They're the ones that make sure that the Bibles are read, that prayers are handled. A woman who submits says this, I am glad when you take responsibility for the things of the house and lead with love. I don't flourish in the relationship when you are passive. I want you to be aggressive in the spirituality of our family. I want you to lead well. I want you to make sure the family works. I find comfort and safety in that. And ladies, you amen to me, right? Submission promotes the mission of God's grace in the light of the unbeliever. The gentleness of a godly wife will lead the hardest individual to God. It is not interesting, is it not interesting that the Holy Spirit and women are both called helpers? You ever thought about that? God says, I'm listening to help to you. That's the Holy Spirit. And the wife glorifies God the best when she models the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Submission doesn't follow a husband into sin. Submission pushes your husband to truth. A submitted wife pushes your husband to the Word, follows him gladly. All right. That's point one. Ladies, you're all looking at this. That's good. What about the men? It's interesting. Peter gives 6 verses to the women and 1 verse to the man. Peter tells the men in verse 7, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. So if we're going to have a biblical marriage, we need to understand what biblical womanhood is. We've seen that. Number 2 is biblical manhood. Peter says to live with your wives in an understanding way. You need to understand your wife, husband. She understands that she needs to submit under you and follow you. But if you're going to lead, if you're going to be a good leader, you better see who's following you, and you better lead well. And the first way you lead well is understand your wife. Live in an understanding way. You need to know your wife. Learn your wife. Study her. Examine her. In a good way, right? Not like examinations, but like in a way that you're examining her life, her mind, her mental capacity. Understand her, know her. She's a mystery. Enjoy the mystery. Y'all are killing me laughing out there. Y'all are killing me. And you got to enjoy your wife. She's a mystery. She's tender. She needs to be loved. And understand her tendencies. Understand her needs. Live in such a way that you know her fears. That you know what tends to let her down. Know her wants, her desires, her cares. Know her. And how do you know her? You talk to her. You talk to her. You ask her questions. You try to see what's bothering her. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes they're not ready to tell you what's bothering them. Sometimes they just don't know what's bothering them. They just bothered. You ever been there? What's wrong with you? I don't know. And you're like, oh, what can I do? I don't know. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Hide, wait for the bombs to stop, and still be there, but you got to know them. You got to understand them. Live in such a way that you know her fears. Do you know what scares your wife? Do you know what she's afraid of? And I'm not talking about spiders. I'm talking about big fears. Know her. Find ways to get to know her. Whether it's finding that quiet time where y'all can just talk. It may take a few hours before you can really get into some deep stuff. You may have to decompress a day or two away from the kids. It may be a weekend trip. But do something. Understand her. Live with her in an understanding way. It's different for each man, but you need to understand your wife. You need to know your wife. So live with an understanding way. A biblical man also honors her. Live your wife in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel. We talked about what that weaker vessel part meant, but what does honoring her mean? Well, there's some ways we can honor our wife. First of all, we honor her physically. We talked about the difference, the hour differences of us between men and women. We never hit when we honor physically our wives. We never hit. We never shove. We never restrain. We never yell at the daughters of God.
Amen.
You hit my daughter. You shove my daughter. You restrain my daughter. It's going to be a bad day for you. How much more would that be for God?
Amen.
We're not physical with the weaker vessel. We don't put the crystal goblet in a position where it can be busted. But we honor it. We put it in a not a carry, but a carry-out cabinet. We put it in a corner cabinet. We put it up on a shelf. We put it to where we can love it and show and respect it. We don't put it in situations to where it can be hurt. We should teach our boys that when we're walking down the street with other ladies, that we get on the traffic side of the sidewalk. Our sons should be ready to defend their sisters and their mamas, and even the car if it needs so be. We should live in such a way that our ladies feel most protected when they're with us. But there is an epidemic in our country where women are more fearful of their husbands than any other man. And right now, during the COVID virus and all the lockdown, we have seen a rise up to 90% in the domestic abuse in some places in our country. Because they're at home with the most scary person in their life, and it happens to be their husband. That doesn't happen in Christianity. It should not happen in Christianity. There's no room for that in Christian manhood. You honor your wife physically. You honor your wife financially. You provide for them. You tend the garden as Adam was supposed to. You make sure things are taken care of. You make sure things are okay. It will fall on you. Now, this doesn't mean that you are the only one who's supposed to work. That's not what I'm saying. But it is your responsibility that needs are taken care of. You need to know where the money's going. You need to know what's being spent on. You need to make sure that everyone is taken care of. It will fall on you, husband. You need to outwork all the other men so that you can provide for your family. This is hard. That's part of the curse. That thorns and thistles will be on the ground. And we would have to work in the sweat of our brow. You provide physically. You honor physically. You honor financially. You honor verbally. Honoring your wife verbally doesn't mean you give. It doesn't mean you put her down. It doesn't mean you make her feel less than she is. You don't talk about her in front of others. You don't call her derogatory terms. I've heard people call their wives their old lady. It just bothers me. Like, woo, don't do that. I mean, if she likes it, okay, but I don't think the ladies here would like that. So. You honor her emotionally. You don't do things that cause emotional stress to her. You try to protect her from emotional stress. You share with her your emotions. You let her know, or you let her rather into your life. She wants to know how you tick. That's just how she's made. She wants to know your emotional stuff going on. And I have trouble like with this. Like, what's bothering you? I'm good. But really in my mind, it's just a mess. Figure out a way to verbalize this. Figure out a way to honor her emotionally. Bond with her emotions. Women are emotional creatures. You know how I know this? I've got 3 daughters. Jeremy's laughing, saying amen to that. They are emotional. It's beautiful most times. Honor them emotionally. Honor them sexually. You are hers, and she is yours. God has given you to each other. So she should not worry about your faithfulness. So you're not the flirty guy, okay? You're not the flirty guy. You're not the, I have a side woman guy. You're the one-woman man guy. That's who you are. Totally. So you need to be madly and deeply in love with her. Infatuated with her. If you are married to your wife, you enjoy her and everyone. Because God has given her to you and you to her. Enjoy each other. Enjoy the bond, the physical bond that you have with her. Drink deeply of your wife. So you're not the porn guy. You're not the infatuated with the movie or TV star guy. It's not you, so you honor her. You should be treating her as a daughter of God. Now look at Sarah, who's mentioned here in the Bible. I look at how Abraham really does some stupid stuff, but I look how God protected her, how God had his hand on her. And God used this woman for us and for the whole world. And so we should, as biblical men, create an environment to where our wives flourish. Where they grow, where they can become who God has intended them to be. Just as the church does under Christ, we are to create a place where our wives can flourish. Peter signifies the difference here by using words in the Greek that are feminine and masculine. Woman, man, husband, wife. Signifying to us the differences. Signifying that just simply that we should celebrate the femininity of women. The flowery, dressy, smelling good ladies. I mean, I'm glad God made us different, aren't you? I love the way my wife looks. I love the way she smells. I love everything about her. And God has made me that way. God has designed it that way. And so as a biblical man, someone who can get dirty and get down and gritty and do things that just for example, yesterday I saw my wife trying to move a big pallet. And Emma was helping her, and Emma's somewhat of a strong gal, an Amazon woman. But she was lifting this pallet, and poor little Beth just cried. I felt so sorry for her. And so I come over there, and I stopped, and I just picked it up, man. And she was just like, "You are so amazing." No, she didn't say that. But I picked it up, and I moved it over. And I could tell by her eyes, she's like, "Well, that looked easy." And we threw it down, and Emma goes, "That was a lot better." And man, this is how God made us. I mean, we're pickle jar openers, folks. I mean, that's awesome. Right? So the spiritual implications of marriage is this. We see at the end, he says, hey, husbands, live with your wives. The last part, he says, so that first of all, since they are heirs with you, the grace of life. We are heirs together. We are together going to be eternally with Christ. Now, I'm not trying to say there's marriage in heaven or get into that, but I know we're going to be there together, and we are together in this thing right now, so we're working for the future together. We have an investment in this. We are both in. We are together as husband and wife. Why? So that our prayers may not hinder. And that's specifically to the husband. Your prayer partner, your most intimate prayer partner needs to be your wife. This is something that we as a couple at home struggle with sometimes. We get so busy, we're praying with the kids, we're trying to get them in bed. Next thing you know, the day's gone, I'm snoring, and me and my wife haven't even spent much time together. We need to make sure that we are spiritually intimate with one another. And it goes on, it says when you are not being the biblical husband, when you're not living with your wife in an understanding way, when you're not showing honor to them, what does it say? It says, so that your prayers may not be hindered. So when you're not doing these things, your prayers are hindered, husbands. So when you treat the daughters of God in not a good way, God's not going to hear your prayers. The example will be this. If someone's hurting my daughter, if someone's taking advantage of one of my daughters, and then they ask me, hey, would you help me with some stuff? Do you really think I'm going to help them? Anybody who mistreats my girls are definitely not going to be helped. God is serious about his daughters. So we see these implications that we are to be together, heirs in the grace of life. And so if you want to have a good prayer life, love your wife, treat your wife right. We need to lead. We need to see to it that nothing hinders our relationship with God because our relationships with our husbands are hurting. So I know this reminder that marriage, a biblical marriage, is not about staying in love. You remember when you first got married, right? How it was just so fun and just warm and fuzzy, you know, and like literally I am warm and fuzzy, but it is just this everything was just so magical, you know, and I mean like the stars, shooting stars, and just wonderful things, like literally that kind of stuff, you know, and so but one day, about a couple of years into marriage, and you got a diaper. You've got a trash can running over with diapers, and you're wondering how you're going to make the next bill, and everything's just kind of crazy. That warm and fuzzy feeling seems a long way away. Marriage is not mainly about feeling and staying in love, quote unquote, but it's about keeping the covenant. The main reason it's about covenant keeping is because God designed the relationship between a husband and a wife to represent the relationship between the church and Christ. And there's times where the church is very unlovable. There's times when we as a church don't really deserve the love of Christ. There's some times where we're just kind of faithless, and we kind of are not really living in such a way that we would not deserve the love of Christ. But you know what? The love of Christ never goes away. He still loves us. And so the deepest meaning of marriage is that ultimately the roles of headship and submission are so important is because it represents the gospel. It shows us the relationship between Christ and the church. And God's purpose for the church and for the Christian marriage is holy joy. is unshakable joy. And Christ died to bring all this out. So a Christian marriage, a biblical marriage is this. I'm going to describe it to you. So here you have a wife who adorns herself with quietness and gentleness, purity and respect. She's a godly woman. She works hard at living it out. She's not perfect, but she loves Jesus. Her husband, he has resolved to spend his life studying this mysterious, fascinating woman that God has brought into his world. He works every day to live with her in an understanding way. He knows how the world treats women. He knows what the world says, and he wants to protect her as the weaker vessel and make a difference in her life. Why? Because they're co-heirs of heaven. They are co-heirs of grace. They both have been bought with the blood of Christ. And so, because of this, there's not going to be aught between them. They're not going to let the sun sit down on the anger. Their life. They're going to make sure they resolve all issues, because it's not about them. They're going to resolve fights. They're going to deal with resentments. They're not going to be bitter towards one another. They're not going to withhold their bodies from one another, because they know it's not about them. They know that if they don't strive to make this marriage work out, they are not doing what the purpose of marriage is for. And so at the end of the day, the marriage is not about them, it's about Jesus. It's not making Jesus look good. And so the man, when he's hurt and he gets his feelings hurt from his wife, he keeps loving her, not because she's lovable, but because he promised Jesus that he would love her. And that he wants to make Jesus look good. And so when the husband fails as a husband and he botches it, the wife doesn't just run off and talk junk about him. But she's there, she supports him, she lifts him up, and she brings him up. Why? Because he's lovable? No, because Jesus loves him and Jesus loves her. And because of Jesus, she's going to love him, and they're going to work this out. That's why Jesus brought them together. They're becoming more holier, more set aside, more joyful because of each other. Because of the relationship, they're becoming more like Christ. Because they're working together, and you see, they are married, not for themselves, but now they are married for Christ. That's why God brought them together, to bring glory to himself and joy to them. And now they're knowing more and more about Jesus and more about God together than they ever could apart. That's a biblical marriage. Amen?
Amen.
So church, husbands, wives, now you're probably thinking, Timmy, do you just care about married people today? Well, that's what this text is directed to. If you're not married, man, just glorify God in your singleness. But if you're married, husband, understand your wife. Honor her. Woman, wife, respect your husband. Love him. Submit. For this is God's will. This is not covenant church's will. This is not Timmy's will. This is the will of God. The many of us are in broken situations. There are ladies here within the hearing of my voice, probably online, that have been abused. They've been hurt. I want you to know that all brokenness aside, that Christ is for you, becoming the best you can be, by molding you and taking your suffering and purifying you like gold does in the fire. So this morning, you allow the Word of God to work deeply in your life. Jeremy's already coming up. He's going to start singing. The girls are going to sing. And you respond to the Word of God. I want to pray. Lord, we love you. Thank you for this day. God, I pray for those sitting at home. I pray that you just bless them. For those here, God, I'm thankful for them. What a wonderful day it's been. May you be glorified in all that we say and do. May you bless our marriages. Bless our homes. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. our marriages, our lives beautiful. Lord, many of us have come to marriage with broken pieces. Lord, many of us have gotten broken because of marriage. Some of us are just broken in general, Lord. And in this Christian life, you take broken people and you make them beautiful. God, you take ashes and you give us beauty. And we thank you for that. For that is the gospel. That God saves sinners. Thank you, Father. Thank you for having everybody here this morning. What a blessing it's been to be in your word. We just ask God that you would just guide us, direct us until next week. And thank you for all you're doing. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so church, don't forget this coming week, next week, we will meet here at 11 a.m. for worship. You might want to come just a skosh early so we can run through all the different things we're going to do. We're going to try to take everyone's temperature, rather, and that way we can know that as you're here, you're safe. We've got hand sanitizer. Trying to get those words out. Hand sanitizer at the doors. Each door you'll be able to come in and wash up. We have deep cleaned the church. We're going to plan on doing it again before next week. And we are doing lots of things, precautionary measures, just to make you feel comfortable and not be cautious and just worry about being cautious. But we want you to be comfortable and able to worship next week as you come. Once again, though, if you're in a situation where you feel it's better for you and your family to be at home, that's fine. There's no guilt there. We want you to know we support you in that decision. We love you. And so we're still going to be doing the video. It ain't going to stop. Facebook Live is going to keep rolling on, and we're going to keep doing it. We want to roll on. 18 Miller, roll on. We're going to keep going. Other than that, I think that's all we got going on. Is anything else I need to say, fellas? Anything else? We'll try to Zoom it next week, and we'll give that a shot. Oh yeah, thank you. Also, if you want to give, we have been. I want to say this too. Thank you for continuing to give. I've heard that churches have been hurting. We have not been one of those churches. Now that doesn't mean you need to let up. Keep giving. Keep participating. Keep being generous. That's good. But if you haven't and you want to, you can do it online. Germ free. So you do that online. You don't have to spray nothing down. You don't have to put on no handy sandy, and you got it. And so you do that online, or you can send it to us here at 540 Ridge Creek Road, 28787. And thank you for participating in the giving. Just keep your ears open for different announcements that are going on. Remember, lots of changes, but next week we have church. You'll see all the deets on Facebook. We love y'all. Trey saying wrap it up. I'm trying to, and see y'all soon.